Hello and welcome back to another episode of Let's Build an E-commerce Store with Spring-boot-bakend. This is episode 10, where we're going to be doing the second part of the email verification. If you haven't seen episode 9, please go back and watch that first, because this is a two-parter, so you need to do episode 9 to be able to do episode 10. I'm not going to spend too long on the introduction, so I'm just going to let us jump straight into the development environment and get right into it. Okay, so welcome back to our development environment for the second part of the email verification segment. So last episode, what we did is we focused on sending the verification email out when they register. This segment, we're going to focus on when the user tries to log in. We need to block them if they're not verified, and also when they are not verified but they haven't been sent an email for a while, we should deliberately go out of our way to resend them an email to go, look, we've resent you an email to verify, could you please go and check your email. So the first thing we need to do is actually have a way of telling if the user is verified or not. So let's go into the local user, and we're going to create a new property here, which is going to be a boolean, and it's going to be email verified. That's going to be mandatory, and there we go, email verified. So we're going to hit OK, and what we're going to do while we're here, so this is our email verify flag, so it's going to default to false, but what we're also going to do is we're going to do something in preparation for later. So when we look at our verification tokens, we need to know what the latest token we created was, because when we're doing that check to say, oh, when was the last time we sent them a token, was that more than an hour ago, for example? If it is, then resend them a new one. What we can do is above the verification tokens, we can go at ordered by, not ordered, order by, and then we can put in here ID DESC for descending. And what that will do is, when the Hibernate layer goes to fetch the verification tokens from the database, it will query it with the ID descending, which means that you're going, because the ID is forever auto-incrementing. If you choose a different way of identifying, then maybe you need to do something else, maybe use the creation date. But because it's always incrementing, if you always sort it from the biggest number down, then the biggest number is going to be the latest one you created. So when it fills this list is also going to be in that order. So that's just why we're doing that, and that's just going to help us down the line when we go to do it. Okay, so now let's go over to our user service again. And if we think about it, there's no way of this user service bit here replying back to whatever's calling it to say, how do, we looked at it, but this user isn't verified. We've got a string, but at the moment, if we put the string as null, that means that actually the user was an invalid login. So we can't reuse that kind of logic. So let's create an exception to flag that. And we're going to call this exception user not verified exception. And it's going to extend the exception. And we're actually going to store something in this. We're going to store a boolean saying new email sent. And that's going to be the constructor as well. So I'm going to set the constructor to take in that same boolean. New email sent. This dot new email sent equals new email sent. And then we're also going to put in a getter method for that as well. Okay, so then if we go back to our user service, let's work on this now. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is, once the user we've checked that the user exists, the username, and then we check that the password is valid, the next thing we want to do is we want to say if the user dot get mail verified, and I prefer to actually rename this, so I think it should say is email verified, because that sounds more logical. So let's come back to our user server, user service even, and is email verified. If their email is verified, then we just continue as we are normally. Otherwise, what we're going to do is we're going to regardless throw a new email user not verified exception, and we're going to put a boolean here of resend, and we're going to put that in there, resend, and the resend is going to be the boolean that determines whether we need to resend their email. So what we can do is we can say we're going to resend if, and before we do that, actually, we're going to get the list of verification tokens. So we get list of verification token out of the user, and then if the verification tokens size is equal to 0, right? So for whatever weird reason, we have a database where there's a user who is not verified and no verification tokens are stored for them, then we need to send it. Or the verification tokens get the 0 index, meaning the very first index that's there, and then get the creation timestamp out of that. And we're going to just drop this down to another line so it's a bit easier to read. So if they get current timestamp, and then that gives us the timestamp of when we created this. So if we say before, if that is before, and then we want a new timestamp of system.currentTime_millis, and then we want to subtract 1000 milliseconds, make a second, and then 60 seconds make a minute, and 60 minutes make an hour. So we're basing it off an hour. So this is where you would change this. You could have it as a configurable thing. I think in the JWT service, we have an example where we have a timeout that's based on a property. But yeah, an hour is what we're going to go for. So we can see here what we're saying is if there's no verification tokens ever been sent, or if the first one, the newest token that's been sent, the timestamp it was created on was before an hour ago, then we want to resend it. So we can see here we've got an error. We need to add that to the exception to the method stub. So up here, throws exception. And then in here we also need to go, if we need to resend, we need to do verification token is equal to what was it again? Create verification token we made earlier. Remember that? So that helpful little private method. And then that creates our verification token. And the verification token DAO, we need to save that verification token. And then finally, the email service, we need to send that verification token out. And again, this is going to throw that email exception. So we're going to add that to our method. So we can see here what we're doing now is we're saying if the user is valid, then continue as normal. Otherwise, we're going to check out their verification tokens. Do they have none? Or was the last one they created more than an hour ago? If it is, then resend it. We're going to create them a new one, save it to the database, and then send the email. And then regardless of that, we're going to throw a new user not verified exception, resend. So now we can go up to our controller level, and inside the controller in the login part, so we come down here, we can see we've got a new exceptions catch. So let's put a try and catch around this. So if the email failure exception appears, what we're going to do is we're actually going to return a response entity of status HTTP status internal server error, because it's not on the user, that one. That is just because for whatever reason we couldn't send the email. It's nothing to do with the user. And then in the case of the user not verified exception, we're going to return And actually, let's not do anything just yet. We're going to actually enhance first the login response class we had before. So we're going to add 2 new fields to it. We're going to add a boolean success and a string failure reason. And we'll add the getters and setters for those 2 new fields. So this is basically a way of us sending back to the front end a kind of more informational based response. So the traditional 400, 401, 200 HTTP codes, they are very descriptive. However, they don't cater for every scenario. So being able to put success and failure reason in here is going to help us to enhance the front end's ability to figure out what's going on. So what we need to do here is that existing response, we want to set success to true for that. And then inside the user not verified exception, we're going to create a new login response. And then we're going to say response.setSuccess false, because it's failed. And then we're going to create a new reason variable, and that's going to say user not verified. Now you see here I'm using all the caps because this isn't what's going to be displayed on the front end. The front end should interpret this string and then show a more user-friendly version. And then we're going to say if the exception.isNewEmail sent, we're actually going to then add on top of the reason an extra underscore email resent. And then finally at the end we're going to go response.setFailureReason, a reason. And then we're going to go response return response entity dot status, and we're going to say http status dot forbidden dot body is the response. So let's recap what's going on here. So we're going to try and log the user in. If we receive a email failure exception, then we just say an internal server error happened. If we get a user not verified exception, then we build up a response saying that we've not successfully logged in. We set the reason to be user not verified. If we have resent an email, we add underscore email resent to the end, and then we set that failure reason, and then we send it out with the status code of forbidden. So there we go. That's the login. And from the last episode, we added the new throws to the register user, so we need to add that to a catch clause for that one as well. So email failure, and in that case, we want to return response entity dot status http status dot internal server error, because again, that's not the fault of the user. That's just because for whatever reason we couldn't issue that out to the client. Okay, so there we go. Now we've got our login side of it done. The next part is to do the verification endpoint. So how they actually verify the email. So let's create a new post mapping here, and we're going to call that verify. And then we're going to go public response entity verify email, and then we take in a request parameter. That's going to be a string token, the token that we've sent them. And then we're going to say if the user service dot helps if there's actually code in the user service to do that first. So we've created a little method stub, but let's go over to the user service first. So in our user service, we're going to create a new method here, and in that method we're going to say public boolean verify user, and that's going to take in our token from before. And then what it's going to do is it's going to first we're going to verify that token exists. Now how do we verify the token exists? Well, if we go in our verification DAO we can go find instance, and it's going to be an optional type because it may not exist. And then we're looking for the token, where that is exactly that. So we can hit OK. Come back to our user service. So we can now go optional verification token. And go op token is equal to verification token do.find by token token. And then next we say if the op token dot is present, then we can do some code. Otherwise we're going to return false because we've not been able to verify the user. So first we say let's get the verification token out. So we're just going to put verification token out by doing op token.get. Then next we're going to get the user out of the verification token. So local user equals verification token.get user. And then we want to say if the user is not verified, because if they are already verified, well, why are we doing anything? It's a bit strange. Then we say user.set email verified to true. And then next we want to go into the local user and we want to save the user that we've just set. And then finally we want to go to verification.token DAO. I don't think we've made it yet, so sorry. We're going to go back to the token one. We're going to create a I'm going to create a new method in here that's it says delete, and we want to return type number of items deleted. Nothing. We want to delete all records where the user is a given user. So that's going to do delete by user, and we specify the user, and it will delete all records inside our verification token table. So if we go back to our user service, we go DAO.delete by user, and that's how we do it. And then finally we need to return true as well. So if we think about what this bit of code is doing, so first we try and find the token inside the database, because if it's not in the database, we didn't issue it and it shouldn't be valid. Then we take the token out, we get the user from the token, and we go, is the user already verified? Because if it is, we shouldn't be doing anything. We say user.set email verified to true. Save the user, and then we delete all tokens for that user in the database because we no longer need them. And then we just return true, and we return false if there's any problems at all. Okay, so let's go back up to our authentication our authentication controller. Actually, before we do that, because we are actually changing data, we're not querying, we need to actually annotate this method with @transactional from the Jakarta transaction package. And that's because if you're just querying data, that's fine. But if you start actually changing data, you have to actually annotate this with @transactional to say that I'm changing data in here. You need to create a proper session for it. So we can now go back to authentication controller finally. And inside the authentication controller, what we're going to do is we're going to write the code to say if the user service verify user by token is passed, then we can return a response entity of OK. Build that. Otherwise, return a response entity of status HTTP status conflict. And the reason why I say conflict is because it's either a conflict in which that the user is already verified, or it's a conflict in which that the token doesn't exist. And then I believe that's it, because otherwise you would kind of want to verify decoding JWT with a try catch, but there's no decoding we're doing. We've encoded the JWT, stored it in the database, and then we're referring to the database to verify that it's real. So there's no decoding, so we don't need to do a try catch for that. So that's it. There we go. Brilliant. So that should be the most of it. I think the only thing left is if we go into application properties, we need to configure our SMTP stuff. So we're going to call this a new section called SMTP configuration. So this is how we tell Spring how to connect to our SMTP server. So the first one is spring.mail. So they're all under spring.mail, or most of them are anyway. And the first one is host, so it's going to be local host for us. Spring.mail.port is 25. If you remember, if we go on our little SMTP for dev thing up here, port 25 is what it's running on. Now these are the other parameters that I'm going to explain in the video, just because you may need them if you implement this on a proper SMTP host. So you've got spring.mail.username. Now that's going to be if you have an authentication. You've got spring.mail.password. You've also got spring.properties.mail.smtp.auth equals true. You've also got spring.properties.mail.smtp.start tls.enable equals true. So those two, I know that these are about if you are connecting to an authentication-based SMTP server. Those are the details you provide. These two, I'm not 100% familiar with. The auth, I believe, is obviously if you want to turn on, if you say, oh, I'm connected to the server, you don't need authentication, you can turn it off, and you can also turn it on if you are requiring it. TLS is a security protocol, so that's about SSL, so, encryption during the communication phase. All I'm going to say about this is when you go to implement this, just simply Google Spring Boot mail properties for, and then whatever the SMTP host. So Gmail, I don't know, Azure Active Directory, Exchange Server, stuff like that. And then there'll be some sort of tutorial or something that will help document that explains it to you. There are so many use cases that I can't go through every single one. So this should be everything, I would hope. Obviously, the testing is where we're going to find if there's any problems. So I think that's what we should be starting with. So first things first, let's just start the application. That's going to be the first real test, isn't it? So if we start the application, we can see that it has got an error. Lovely. And this error is because we're trying to add a unique field without a default. So this is just because Hibernate doesn't work too well when updating the table like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come into here. We've got our local user table, and I'm going to write a custom bit of code to upgrade our table. So we're going to go alter table local underscore user add email underscore verified. I'm going to say that's a bit not null default 0. So that's the code that you want. You want alter table local user add email verified bit not null default 0. And if you just run that code, it should get successfully completed. And we can now add that new email verified field, and you can see that it's set to 0. So let's restart our application. Hopefully this time we won't see that error again. There we go. The alternative is that you could just delete the database and start from scratch. Remember, if you do that, you've got to reload your where is it, that insert dummy dev data SQL. You need to redo that. But yeah, so we've initialized. That's brilliant. So now what we can do is we can have a look. So we've got test 1, right? Let's try and log in as test 1 because it says it's verified as 0. So what's going to happen if we try and do that? So I go to login and I'm logging in as test 1. If I click send, see I've got successful user not verified email resent. So if we come into SMTP for dev, I'll just drag this out a bit so it's a bit more visible. You can see here, email to verify. So verify your email to activate your account, and that's our token there. And if we go into our database and go into refresh the table, so hit F5, verification token. You see here for user ID 8, which is test 1, we've got a token in here. So that's brilliant. So now what we can do is we can actually verify the token. So we're going to right click on our login tab, click duplicate, and we're going to go auth and put verify as the endpoint. We can turn off the body because we don't need that. And we can come in here and we can go verify as the param, and the value, take it from our email here, copy that and paste it into there. And if we hit send, 403 forbidden. Oh no, what's going wrong here? Well, I'll tell you what's gone wrong. If you remember from the previous episode, what we did is we added security on our endpoints. So if you go into web security, see we allowed product, we allowed auth register, we allowed auth login, but we haven't allowed /auth/verify. So now if we just restart our application, and when it loads, we can retry this again. And we've got 403 forbidden again. And there we go. What's the problem here? Token. What did I call it? I see here. Well, for some reason I've got 2 of them anyway, so I can delete that one. But the query parameter, I forgot. I named it verify instead of token. It's token. So if I hit send again, I've got status 200. Okay. So if I come in here and I refresh here, notice my token has disappeared. I refresh our local user, and you see test 1 is verified. So if I now come into the login screen and try to log in with test 1, success true, and there's my JWT for test 1. There we go. That's verified it's working. Now let's test the register side of it as well. So we're going to update this to be test 3. And if we hit send, we get status 200. And if we go into SMTP for dev, you see test3 at test.com. Our token again. So that's brilliant. So we've tested that the verification endpoint works, the login works. If I go in and try and do a login with test3 now, notice that it's false and I get user not verified, meaning that there's not a new email being sent out. And then the only other thing to test is what happens if the email server is not available. So let's update those to 4. If you go into SMTP, you can click on this up here and it will stop it temporarily. And we click send again. And you see 500 internal server error. We can come back here, start it back up again, hit send one more time, status 200, and there's our email. So you can see that we've tested it, we've thoroughly gone through every kind of scenario, and it's all working. It's all kind of in a environment. It's all working in a loop. We've implemented the workflow that we decided on. So there we go. That's the end of this episode. Thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate all the support. Thank you very much for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe the video and the channel. As always, there's a playlist on the channel with all of these videos in one place, so you can watch them all at once. And in the description, there is the link to the GitHub repository for the start and the end of episodes. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next episode.